Thanks very much, Linda, and I can't remember talking to a more colourful looking crowd. I've got to say, it's pretty fantastic. So, I got my first Apple in 1984, way before some of you were even born, and the kids found it the other day in the attic, and they brought it down, and they turned it on, and they said, it doesn't do anything, and I said, no, you got to put... Oh, forget it. But the thing is, it still works. You know, what a fantastic advertisement for the product. So I'm a psychologist who's actually been using technology for a hell of a long time. And over the last 10 years, particularly in my clinical practice. And I want to talk a little bit about how I believe we can use Apple's devices in particular to build well-being. What does the research say about the emotional well-being of young people today? And I'm afraid this is the downside of the talk, because I wish I could tell you that everything is kind of bunny rabbits and rainbows, but it's not. The research is basically very clear that one of the groups that's particularly poorly off are our Indigenous young people. So when we say, oh, how are young people going all together, you can't actually just make a blanket statement, because the suicide rate for our Indigenous young people is 2 to 3 times worse than it is for the non-Indigenous, so that would be a particular area of interest from a research point of view. We've got homeless young people. About 80% of homeless young people have a mental illness, which has basically contributed to their homelessness. We can talk about incarcerated young people, and many of you will have seen the pictures from the Northern Territory. Again, a very high proportion of those young people have mental health problems. We can talk about GLBTIQ, 6 times the rate of suicide than straight kids. And what we have to remember is that in your school, as we speak right now, a minimum of 10% of your student body fall into this category. We also can't forget transgender, and there's a New Zealand study which looks at 2.7% prevalence in a school population, which is just staggering. I don't actually think we know the exact number. What I can tell you is I used to work at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, and I remember we had a transgender unit there, and I remember we had about 1 patient a year when I was there. This year, they had 250 clients, some as young as 4 years of age. And it's really difficult, I think, for a lot of people to come to terms, including members of my own family. When I talk to my wife and my kids about this, go, not comfortable. The fact is, newsflash, there's a third gender. And whether you're comfortable with it or not, bad luck. There are some kids who are simply born in the wrong bodies, and living a life of denial is not a great thing. Their suicide rate can be up to 60%. If not addressed properly. So we need to remember that that's another high-risk population. And then we've got kids with chronic illnesses. I was talking earlier to some staff. The highest prevalence chronic illness in your school is actually asthma. And asthma, if you talk to the Australian Asthma Association, has an extremely high prevalence, kids with asthma, teenagers with asthma, very high prevalence of depression, far higher than in the normal population. So think chronic illness as being a catch-all for that. And then, of course, we've got young people with disability, and right across the board, if we look at all the different research projects that have been done, looking at the mental health and well-being of young people, the picture is not great. All of this is good research. The report that I would ask you to look at as the most up-to-date, and of course this will change in about a month's time when the when the 2016 research comes out. But every year, the good people at Mission Australia have done this survey, and what's interesting is that they've done it every year since 2002, so we've got trend data here, which is very, very useful. And the neat thing is they've asked exactly the same question in exactly the same way continuously since 2002. They annoy me a bit by adding questions, I get that, but the pure data itself is very interesting. So what are young Australians worried about? Well, this is 15,000 15 to 19-year-olds, and they said their biggest problem is coping with stress. Now, If you accept that there is a connection between well-being and learning, which to me anyway is from the University of the Bleeding Obvious, what we have to recognise is that if you don't address this issue, it doesn't matter what devices you use, it doesn't matter how good your pedagogy is, nothing's going to change. Because kids who are depressed and anxious, kids who have got an eating disorder, kids who are using substances, their learning is impaired. So we have to understand that to achieve the core business of your school, we have to address this issue, coping with stress. So I would ask you, if I came to your school and asked, is your school running at the moment any courses at all in anger management, problem solving, decision making, conflict resolution? How are we going? And the answer is probably not great, not good enough. We have to address what the data is telling us. And when I show you the figures around this, you'll see why. The other issue is school or study problems, and we're particularly worried, more perhaps in the other states than Queensland, because you've got your OP system, which isn't perfect, but certainly in the other states where you've got this final Year 12 exam, 31% of Year 12 students are diagnosed with a clinical depression. 41%, for God's sake, have an anxiety disorder, and 18% are suicidal. So if you need another high-risk group, let's start with the Year 12s, because I'm really worried about them. On top of that, we've got issues around body image and issues around depression. My litmus test for how well your school is going is if you invited me to your school and I grabbed a kid in Year 10 at random and said, "Kid, please explain to me the difference between depression and sadness," and they were able to tell me, you've got one impressed psychologist. The difficulty is, I don't think you could ask some of the staff that question and then know the answer. So we need to raise the levels of emotional literacy, and if you want research to drive that agenda, go online and look at Mission Australia's youth survey every year, and of course the figures are horrendous. This is just extremely concerned, very concerned, and somewhat concerned. 2/3, well over 60% of the kids are saying, I don't know how to cope with stress. If you accept that school is about preparing young people for the future, you've got to address this issue, because you can't just hope that the universities and TAFEs will pick it up, because they're not either. So we need to address the really important issues. And you can see the percentages are pretty high with school or study problem, body image and depression as well. And by the way, each of these figures have increased every single year that the survey's been done. So as a friendly critic of schools, and God knows I've been doing this for a long time, my request is, what are you doing? Because if you just keep doing the same thing the same way, you either get the same thing or worse, and at the moment we're getting worse. So there's some ammunition for you if you want to be a change agent in your school. What about mental health issues? So obviously the well-being, the conclusion from that stuff is that young people are not very good at managing their well-being. That's the takeaway message. But what about actual mental health problems? If we look at rates of suicide as being a pointy end of that in Australia, how are we going? Well, actually not very well. The latest figures, which are of course released in 2014, but relate to 2012, so don't be fooled, is that 2,864 Australians took their own lives. 65,000 Australians are thinking about it. So today in Australia, please remember that 8 people will take their own lives just today and every day on average. And if that's okay with you, fine. Certainly isn't okay with me, and it's what gets me out of bed every day to try and do something about that. Here are our suicide rates, now at the highest level in 13 years. And you might be thinking, but Michael, why are you showing me the adult suicide rates? This is why I'm showing you with a little bit of light. This will work, it's good. Because suicide accounts for more than 1/3 of the deaths amongst 15 to 24-year-olds. So this is where we have almost like a petri dish in schools where we grow mental health. please remember that 3/4 of all the psychological problems in human beings start under the age of 24, and 50% start under the age of 15. So schools that think, oh, mental health isn't my issue, wrong again, because it is absolutely your issue. And girls, I'm terribly worried about girls. It's so appropriate that this iPadpalooza be conducted in a girls' school, and from all accounts an outstanding one. And you look at this, 50% increase, the largest jump. And that doesn't mean that I'm ignoring the 55 to 64-year-old women, because I'm not, because they had a 50% jump as well. But I really do want us to focus, particularly if you're from a girls' school, on this crisis. And if you happen to read Steve Biddulph, my mentor's book, Raising Girls, which he wrote now 5 years ago, he predicted exactly this. He said girlhood was under siege. There were way more risk factors than protective factors, and if we didn't do anything about it, which we didn't, the situation would get worse, which is exactly what's happened. The cost, of course, is unsustainable, $28.6 billion, and that's just the cost of supporting people with mental illness in 2013. God only knows what it is now. So our mental health system is at a crossroads. Essentially, if we look at adults, 45% of all adults have experienced a mental illness, but, and this is the crisis, less than half get the help that they need. So in order to double the number of people getting help, we either have to find, good luck with this one, $9 billion and another 9,000 odd more professionals over the next 15 years, or we have to rethink the Australian mental health care system. And this, of course, is where I believe technology comes in. We need to shift to a 21st century model of mental health care. And of course, we've got to also invent in promotion, prevention and early intervention, which is where you guys come in. If we can actually give the young people the skills, the knowledge and the strategies to manage their well-being in the first place, and I'm talking starting in primary school, then obviously we're going to be able to do something later on. So the costs are just outstanding, $6.29 billion just for youth mental health. And the majority of young people experiencing this health don't get the care that they need. So we're just wasting at the moment $780,000 per hour, and that's just not going to work. So what's my solution? My solution is technology, because technology matters to my clients. My clients are adolescents for whom their real world doesn't divide into on and offline, it's seamless. It is literally how they communicate. I had the boys, both my sons, in my home for their mother's birthday on the weekend, and they were sitting across from one another, texting each other. And I'm thinking, you can talk, it's actually possible. And the response, but then you'd know what we were saying. So that's why they were doing it. This is a generation that's never known a world without computers, and we forget that. And it provides them with a flexibility and confidentiality, particularly when it comes to mental health resources, which is unrivaled in any other way. And that's what's so exciting. If I'm talking to a kid on FaceTime and don't use anything other than FaceTime, because as my good friends from Apple told me, that's the most secure way you can have a conversation. Forget Skype on Skype. What we have here is something that is absolutely secure, and it removes the geographical, attitudinal and financial barriers. Sad story, last week, a man, for whatever reason, took his own life. He left behind two 10-year-old boys. And these two 10-year-olds came into my office, and when I walked into the waiting room, I nearly burst into tears because they were holding each other's hand for security. One of them's on the spectrum, the other one wasn't, and I communicated with the one on a spectrum purely by using an iPad. No other communication was necessary. And if I showed you what he created on the iPad, you'd be in tears. But it was his way and my way that we could actually communicate with each other couldn't have done it any other way. It was just brilliant. He then basically, I've won his trust, and every single time he comes in now, I've got the latest edition of Minecraft on my iPad, and we now communicate through Minecraft. It's very, very cool. So all of those people who want to demonise technology, get your act together, move into the times. But the great thing is the geographical attitude and financial benefits. And of course the number of households with access to the internet now, 7.7 million. That was last year. It's going to be much greater. We're just going up and up and up. We're quite tech savvy, us Australians. But look, in terms of mean number of hours by age group, look what the Australian Communications and Media Authority tell us. Look who's using it most. It just makes such sense. This is the portal that we have to use to get through to these young people. So the average 18 to 25-year-old checks their phone officially now 56 times a day, once every 15 minutes. How often do you do it? Guess what? There's an app for that. You can download it, and it can actually report to you how often you check. So I actually downloaded, it's one of the apps that I immediately got rid of because I think I might actually be a little more than 56 times a day, which is a bit sad. What else do we know? We know that 9 out of 10 teenagers tell us that they're actually using their phone while spending what they call quality time with their parents, which is interesting. We know that 7 out of 10 do exactly the same thing when they're with their mates. We know that 5 out of 10 tell us that they're doing that while they're eating in restaurants, which I think is fascinating. This is worrying. 3 out of 10 tell us that they actually do it when they're crossing the road. That's been proven fatal on a number of occasions. And I won't give you the statistics about how many tell me that they're using their phones while having sex. What I am going to do is tell you that a device weighing 155 grams has completely infiltrated virtually every aspect of their lives. The bottom line is there is an upside and a downside. One of the websites I'd love you to visit is the Office of the Children's E-Safety Commissioner. And particularly for those of you who are working with parents, a sub-site within that called iParent. It is without doubt the best resource for primary school and secondary school parents struggling to keep up with technology. And you know, we've got to acknowledge the dangers, and they've got plenty down there, and you can go through all of these and get the latest, most up-to-date pieces of advice for parents. And look, I don't want to deny that there is absolutely a downside to the technology, but I reckon the upside is much bigger. And for all of those people who say, oh, shouldn't we just ban the things? Well, I've got news for you. That horse has bolted many years ago. If you have some time, have a look at this anti-texting ad, which is just extraordinary. I've tweeted out the URL, so if you follow me on Twitter, MCG58, you'll actually see the ad. I'm not going to play it today because at the end of it you would all be crying, and I don't want to upset your meal, but it is an extremely important component. I quite like this as an ad, but I think again it buys into that all technology is bad stuff, and I don't like that at all. So what we've got in psychology is an unprecedented opportunity now to provide this real-time standardised health and wellbeing information directly to young people, to help them manage their wellbeing better. So what we're going to do is we're going to examine how, through a case study, we might use technology to enhance the wellbeing of a young person growing up on the Gold Coast. And I want to introduce you to my hypothetical St Hilda's student, who I'm going to call Georgie. Georgie has an interesting history and could be any one of my clients, an amalgamation of all my clients. She's 16, she attends the local school. She presents with a long history of anxiety that dates back to primary school when she was fairly horrendously bullied by a group of girls, not an unusual circumstance. She never really recovered. She now, in addition to having quite a bit of anxiety, relieves that anxiety by smoking cannabis on the weekend. She lives in part of Australia where cannabis is easier to order than a pizza. And the difficulty with that is that she has no appreciation of the dangers and the role that cannabis smoking is playing in sustaining and maintaining her anxiety and her depression. She describes her worry, her anxiety, as being out of control, and it started to interfere with key aspects of her life, specifically her ability to make friends, her ability to go to school, her relationships at home, and her ability to emancipate from mum and dad. But most importantly, she fears that it is robbing her of her future, that it is interfering with her vocational goals. So that's a concern. She says to me that she often comes to school feeling very anxious and worried. She can't concentrate on the work because of this worry. She often feels on edge and nervous, and on occasions she'll have full-blown panic attacks. Her friends are getting kind of used to it now, and they sort of roll their eyes, oh, she's having another kind of turn, but they're actually getting a bit sick of her, and they're feeding back to her that she needs to do something about this. The truth is that when I take a full history for this young woman, what I find is that all of the key developmental tasks are really being interrupted. And this is an important technique for all people working with young people to use. A great paradigm. If a young person is going okay, they should actually be in the process of figuring out the answer to who am I. They should have a rich repertoire of friends, which, by the way, is the single greatest predictor of well-being in a young woman in 2016. If you've got a young person, I'm not talking about kids on the spectrum here, if you've got a non-spectrum kid and they're in high school and they've got not one friend, my antenna is really buzzing. I'm very, very worried about that kid. She's finding it very difficult to do the normal breaking away psychologically, cutting the psychological apron strings to her mum, because she's constantly seeking reassurance. And the parents actually give her reassurance, and they need some education about how to deal with it as well. And of course, I've mentioned that it's interfering with school. Her parents basically say, when I interview them, that these can be short-lived panic attacks. Sometimes they can last for a long time. But she constantly tells them that something bad is going to happen to them. So if she can't see them, if she's not in touch with them, she believes that they're going to actually have a disaster happen to them. They're sick to death of the unnecessary questions, her constant need for reassurance. And if she makes a mistake at school, or if there's a change of routine that really throws her out, she admits to me that she's a perfectionist. She finds it so difficult to hand in work because it's not perfect yet. So she really agonizes over that, and doesn't feel comfortable when she's handed it in. And she's constantly irritated and constantly in a bad mood, mainly because of the interaction between her and her parents. The emotional temperature in this family is now at boiling point, and everybody is over Georgie's problem and they're sick of it. What happens to her when she feels physically, what the physical manifestations of this anxiety is that she gets a very dry mouth, she can't swallow, she feels like she's got a lump in her throat, she's not sleeping at all well. Not only does she fall asleep after only 3 hours of lying in bed because she's ruminating constantly over what's happening, but she also finds it very difficult to stay asleep. She wakes frequently during the night. She can't concentrate, she experiences muscle aches and pains, especially neck, jaw, shoulders and back. She's very restless, and when she's having a full-blown panic attack, her heart and her breathing is so bad that she actually thinks she's having a heart attack. And sometimes she can get herself so worked up that she throws up. So my diagnosis of this young woman, and all psychologists use this book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health, she actually meets the DSM-5 criteria for what we call GAD, or Generalized Anxiety Disorder. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that she's educated about her illness. Psychoeducation is so often overlooked when we treat people, because some people are still stuck in the old medical model. I'm the doctor, I know everything, I don't have to tell you anything, I'm just going to give you a pill and it'll fix it. What we have to do is make sure that young people are fully informed. And I stick to the principle of, particularly with young women, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you You tell them, and then you tell them what you've told them. So I'll use 3 different, all used through technology, ways of making sure that she understands everything she needs to know about this. So I'll start with reachout.com, which is without doubt the most outstanding website. Fact sheets for young people. They're made by young people, with young people and professionals working together. And very frequently I'll ring up Jono from Reach Out and say, oh mate, I checked out one of your fact sheets and it's slightly wrong, it's got this piece of information, could you fix it? They fix it within minutes. It's that responsive, it's very good. This is a young woman talking about her. This could be Georgia.
When it got really bad, I could just feel it, in my chest. It's like it just takes a hold of you, like a giant fist squeezing you. I could feel my heart pounding, my head would get all hot and my hands were sweaty. The more I panicked, the worse it got. It would just get bigger and bigger until I had absolutely no control. Well, I'd been going through a really tough time. I was stressing about, a lot of things. I guess I just wasn't ready to talk to someone about it. I remembered an old teacher of mine talking about reachout.com, so when I got home one day, I decided I'd just, look it up. Reachout.com really helped me to understand what I was going through. After reading, the fact sheets and stories, it no longer felt like it was this big scary thing. The advice I got, it was really practical and felt easy to start doing things that could help. Reading about other people's experiences also really helped. I guess it's good to know that you're not alone.
And the thing I loved about that, it was an old teacher, presumably someone 30, who actually told her about Reach Out. And this is where you perform this incredibly important role, because quite often they're not going to listen to their parents, but they will listen to you. So if you can be the vehicle to lead them to these resources, that would be fantastic. So what can I do for Georgie? Not like the other ways of telling her about her anxiety will be fact sheets, not just from Beyond Blue, Black Dog, from Origin, but also showing her specific TED Talks that I will select and send her the link to, or even show her on my fantastic iPad Pro, which is my most precious resource as a clinician, and I can just say, hey, well, watch this. And that really does make a huge difference. So Georgie's got a smartphone, and we've discovered her big issues. Her big issue is number 1 is sleep. So I'm going to give her lots of what I call bed-education around sleep. They need 9 hours. The vast majority of young people are not getting 9 hours. Andrew Fuller and I have been begging schools for 20 years, please start school at 10 o'clock and finish it at 4. Young people's sleep cycles are such that melatonin, the sleep hormone, only secretes at midnight. How the hell do you expect them to get 8 hours of sleep when they've got to go get up at 7 to get to school? So we need to change that, and I'm never going to give up. And there's some amazing research done by Oxford University into schools in the UK. They've got 100 schools who've changed it now, and the initial research was that the kids who basically were in those schools, their academic results went up, their behaviour problems went down, and the kids who most benefited were the ones from the most disadvantaged backgrounds. So to me, this is a gain from the University of Bleeding Obvious. Please do it. If he truly loves me, he'll let me sleep. He probably will. The single most important behavioural experience you'll ever have. If Linda lives, and I hope she does, to 92, she will spend 32 years of her life fast asleep. That's a long time. That's how important it is. And we know that if we look at sleep, the bottom line is most young people see it as something that interferes with their life, that gets in the way of having fun. Whereas in fact what we have to do is educate them. Many of the young people are in fact sleep deprived, but there are clear Australian sleep guidelines which I'm going to send her. I'm going to give her lots of information around sleep, it's very important. I'll give her infographics. I will basically give her fact sheets from reputable organisations like the National Centre for Excellence. Sometimes I will actually print these out and I have a PA who laminates them for me. It's much more difficult to screw up a piece of paper that's laminated, and I think I learned that from my primary school colleagues. But sometimes I'll just send it to them as a link. I'll also show them on my iPad Russell Foster's 18 minutes of pure psychological gold. Professor of sleep studies at Oxford University does a brilliant TED talk on sleep. Every single teacher in this room needs to watch this and show it to their students. Just brilliant. The other thing I'll do is I'll give her an app. And this is my favourite app. It's called Recharge, a 6-week course. So it's an app that you only use for 6 weeks, but it teaches them everything they need to know about sleep, gives them practical tips to improve Georgie's sleep-wake routine. She'll get daily reports to track her mood, energy, exercise and sleep, and she'll be able to view graphs to help monitor her progress, which can be reviewed later on. The point is, if she uses this app, she uses it in conjunction with a biometric device, I can track her sleep and I can see what's going on for her. Very, very important. If she's got a jawbone up, that's even better, because when she wakes up in the morning, it'll automatically download via Bluetooth to her iPhone and give her a dashboard of how she slept. Now this is very diagnostic for me. The dark blue, here and here, are REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, at which time you are paralysed. These things are not that sophisticated. The jawbone's got an accelerometer in it. It checks if you're moving. The way in which the good Lord created you is that if you are in fact in REM sleep, you're paralysed, you're not moving, because whoever made us decided we shouldn't act out our dreams, which is probably a good idea. So you're paralysed. So what the jawbone is detecting here is no movement. Now, Georgie's either died or she's in REM sleep. It's one or the other. Fortunately, she goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but 3 things strike me. One is this and this are about the same size. In fact, this one's a bit smaller. It should be bigger. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots of REM sleep, she should have 8 minimum. So I know that she's only slept for 6 hours and 20 minutes. I know that it took her about 10 minutes to fall asleep. This is not good news. So I need to respond to this. And you might use a Fitbit dashboard, which is a little different. Now she's also, her mum is saying, oh look, she snores a lot. So I'm going to use my second favourite app of all time, SnoreLab. I don't know if you've used this, but basically it records Georgie's snoring all night and ranks it mild, loud, or A380 taking off, and gives her a snore score of 59. Now this is from a real patient that I had, and what I did was I was so worried that a kid this age would have such a high snore score that I sent it to a sleep doctor, who sent it to a sleep dentist, who got a device, an oral device for her, and look, Saturday the 5th to Wednesday the 16th, contrast and compare. Massive difference. And this is just one example. I did not have to convince her that she had a problem. The app did it for me. God bless apps. Georgie's mum is worried about her not eating breakfast. Now, 32% of the girls at St Hilda arrive here, borders accepted, having eaten diddly squat for breakfast. Now, if they're sleep deprived and they haven't had breakfast, the neuropsychologist in me tells me that they are actually incapable of learning. I don't care how bright they are. The sole source of energy for the teenage brain is glucose, and if you haven't had any carbohydrate, you've got no glucose, you ain't learning. Simple as that. Interestingly, the girls are far worse than the boys. The boys just totally disorganised, not unexpected. But the girls basically say, oh, I don't want to put on weight. The research shows that if you don't eat breakfast, you end up eating about twice as much as you would if you had breakfast. So that's a bad strategy. So I'm going to send her a website on breakfast. I'm going to basically teach her about not eating junk food. I'm going to show her the research from Felice Jacka, who's the first person to establish on the front page of the American Journal of Psychiatrist, the little researcher in Deakin University, Geelong, the importance of the mood-food link. Look what she found. Adolescents scoring higher on a measure of healthy diet were less likely to report depression, while those with an increased consumption of processed and junk food were more likely to report depression. For the first time in modern medicine, we can now say definitively there is a mood-food link. If you eat foods low in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like fertilizer for the brain cells, you're clearly not going to be performing well. Not only that, but your mood is likely to be lower. So with all of my clients now, I have a dietary intervention. And they say to me, what, you're not a dietitian? I go, shut up, you pay me $260 an hour, take my advice. This is going to work for you. And of course, what I get them on is a Mediterranean diet, and of course, you would know that there's an app for that. And therefore, I will be sending them apps around diet as well. But how can I address her anxiety? I'm going to give her those fact sheets I talked to you about, particularly a fact sheet from them. There's also a web-based program called Mood Gym, 20 years old, 7 randomised controlled trials, put together by Professor Helen Christensen at the ANU, and proved beyond reasonable doubt to be highly effective in young people with mild to moderate anxiety and depression. Why would you not use a program that works and that has been proven to work? And any of you can recommend Mood Gym to your clients. But I'll also educate her parents by sending her a fact sheet, sending them a booklet rather, from Beyond Blue, entitled A Parent's Guide to Anxiety and Depression in Young People. So really important that the parents are educated. I'm then going to actually make sure that I deal with her panic attacks. And any psychologist worth their salt will know that in order to stop a panic attack, you've got to actually induce the relaxation response. How do we do this? Through breathing. So the good people at Reach Out created Breathe, the only iPhone app that I know that uses the camera to detect the person's pulse and then helps them slow their heartbeat down. You cannot have a fight-flight response and a panic attack at the same time. Just not possible. So this is one of the most powerful tools that we have. This is how it works.
Whatever your worries, use Reach Out Breathe to manage your breathing and slow your heart rate so that you feel calmer and more in control. Download it for free on your iPhone or Apple Watch.
Apple Watch, how cool. And for all the losers out there with Android phones, bad luck. There's also, I had to put that in, Linda, sorry. There's also the Brave program, and I seriously want you to know that I use this every single day of my clinical practice. If you've got a little kid with anxiety, there's a component for them. If you've got a teenager, there's a component for them. Again, University of Queensland, Beyond Blue, it works. So why would you not use the technology of these brilliant web-based programs if you had a chance? So the Brave program I'm feeling very good about. The other thing I'll use is Reach Out Worry Time. Very simple program. Have a look.
You can't control every thought you have. Reach Out Worry Time lets you store your worries so that you can get on with your day, and alerts you when it's time to think about them. During worry time, set actions to help you solve your worries, and ditch the ones that no longer matter. Download Reach Out Worry Time for free on the App Store or Google Play today.
Yeah, they let themselves down there at the end, but never mind. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is I can't just throw a whole lot of apps at her. And I want you to know that this is a process. This happens over time. I'm just truncating it for you. But I need her to use mindfulness. And what we know is that there is so much good evidence that using mindfulness meditation for anxiety, for depression, actually works. But what a lot of people don't know is that the research now shows, and we did it, and I say we because I'm on the board of Smiling Mind. We're a charity. We want people to practice mindfulness meditation, and we've just revamped our website. So if you've been on the old one, come and have a look at our new one. It's so cool. Smiling Mind basically is broken up into developmental stages, and I think it's one of the only apps that I've come across that is truly nuanced in this way. So we've got one for children, but have a look carefully. We've actually got one specifically for early adolescence, middle adolescence, late adolescence, and yes, we haven't forgotten the teachers, the adults either. So we've just completed research on the efficacy of this. Does it make any difference if kids do this? And the research is so great. Two really outstanding pieces of information for you. One is when classrooms use Smiling Mind, levels of bullying drop. That's terribly exciting. The second thing is concentration, work performance, working memory, all improves. Most importantly, stress levels go down. So what I think will probably happen in the next, 10 years, I'm predicting that every class in every school throughout Australia in the next 10 years will probably start with a mindfulness exercise. It might not be with Smiling Mind, I don't care, but I just think that's how powerful it is. And that's why I'm going to teach you how to use Smiling Mind, and they've got some fantastic ambassadors as well as board members. Okay. A lot of the girls say to me, well, where's the proof? One of the great things that technology enables me to do, particularly through Twitter, is get the latest information to back up a lot of the claims that I'm making. And Harvard University did this amazing study looking at mindfulness to see whether or not, in fact, it made any difference. So what they did is they took essentially a group of volunteers, and this was 2 years ago, and put them through an 8-week mindfulness course of just 27 minutes a day. They did it at the Massachusetts General Hospital, so the moment they'd finished the mindfulness course, they whacked them inside a magnetic resonance imaging machine. Hands up if you've ever been in an MRI. Loud, noisy, uncomfortable and claustrophobic. Yes? What I can say to you is that these people volunteered to sit in this for 8 weeks every day. And the scans documented how the meditation produced massive changes, and this is the only independent variable. The control group were reading a book and it showed none of these signs. The signs are incredible. A major increase in grey matter density in the hippocampus. What's the hippocampus? The part of the brain essential for memory and learning. Don't tell me that's not going to be useful to your students. But here is the really exciting part. A decrease in grey matter density in the area of the amygdala, the home of stress. Very difficult to learn if you're stressed. So one of the things we think is happening here is the reason we're getting such great results from kids who use this in terms of their learning outcomes is because they're just less stressed, as well as, of course, the increase in grey matter density. The research around this is so exciting. Marty Seligman was telling me of a group of young people who had a flu vaccination and got mindfulness compared to another group that just got the flu vaccination. And the researchers found that the immune response to the mindfulness and vaccinated group was about 3 times greater. No explanation at all. We've got no medical explanation for that at all. Something wonderful is happening around mindfulness. Now, one of the devices, I've actually got it in my bag down here, so I'm going to show it to you. It's called the PIP. And when I hold it up to you, and you'll see how absolutely tiny it is, it's invented by a group in Ireland called Galvanic. And it's literally this big. I'm holding it in my hand. And what it does is it actually is a revolution in stress management. What I'm doing is I'm saying to myself, oh, I need to relax. I'm holding this like one would hold one's hands if you were doing meditation. And what it does is, you can see now, for those of you very sharp-eyed, that it's gone green. So it's actually detecting my galvanic skin response, which is the amount of electricity which is being conducted through my body at this particular time. Now, it makes sense that when you're relaxed, your electricity levels are lower. When you're very stressed, they're higher. This is all it does, and it sends a direct message, visual message, to my iPhone, and it gives me a score for each session. So I've set it for 15 minutes, but I can do it as quickly as 2. I'll start the session by pressing that button, and this is the screen that appears. The more relaxed I am, the more the screen will go green. The more stressed I am, the more it will go red. When I finish, it will give me a session score breakdown, and it will tell me how much of that 15 minutes, or in this particular case 2 minutes, I actually spent in a steady state as opposed to stressed, as opposed to relaxed. And of course the idea is you do this with the mindfulness meditation at the same time, you get better and better and better. There's another device which I love, $110 from Germany. And you know, it's just amazing, because when I was at university, whole rooms did this stuff, and now we've just got it on an iPhone. What this does is it picks up the same thing that this picks up and displays it on a screen. It's called eSense. You can order it from Germany, and the apps are free. The apps, by the way, for this are free as well. So get yourself a PIP or an eSense and start meditating and showing the young people the impact that mindfulness meditation has on their autonomic nervous system. This is literally biofeedback. It's brilliant. There are other ways in which we can now feed back. I don't know if you've seen the melon. This is an amazing little piece of technology, $250, which reads your brain waves. I'm experimenting with my ADHD kids at the moment, getting them to use this and learn to concentrate and focus, because this feeds back directly to their iPad exactly what's going on in their brain. This is the first generation of this stuff. Can you imagine how cool it's going to be in maybe even a year's time? You know how you divide it into loser or iPhone? People in America are either Muse or Melon people. It's kind of like a thing. I've got both because I'm eclectic. That's good. Now, a couple of other things before I shut up and let you go to lunch. One of the really exciting things that I can do is I can show Georgie that one of the major treatments for anxiety and depression is exercise. When you're depressed, of course, she's got a little voice in her head saying, oh, there's no point in exercising because I won't get better, so I won't bother, I'll just sit here and be miserable because that's much more constructive. What I need to do is counter that. Not many of us can afford personal trainers, but with technology, I can now put a personal trainer in her pocket or strapped to her arm, whichever way you like. And the device I'm going to use is called Couch to 5K. This is a beautiful little app. Week 1, day 1, it's going to ask her to take a brisk 5-minute warm-up walk, and then she's going to alternate between a minute of jogging and 90 seconds of walking for a total of 20 minutes. That's week 1, day 1. By week 2, day 1, we're doing a 5-minute walk, but we're actually doing 90 minutes of jogging and 2 minutes of walking for a total of 21 minutes. So we're just gradually increasing. And you can see by week 3, day 1, it's 90 minutes of jogging, 90 minutes of walking, jog for another 3 minutes, walk for 3 minutes. So we're just getting it better. You can choose your different trainer. So you can have a bloke, you can have all sorts of different characters who yell or scream or talk to you gently, whichever you prefer. And essentially at the end of it, you get great job, you get told how much distance you've done, your total time, and you get to rate how you're feeling as a result. And what I will do is encourage her, when she texts me her completion screen, I'll send her a message saying, wow, fantastic. And I will treat her as if she's just run the Boston Marathon, because to her this is just a mountain to climb. Now, I cannot underestimate the importance of this type of technology. I don't give them any excuses. I said, look, we've downloaded this app in my room. You've come to me, you want to get better. Let's do this. Let's talk about the advantages of vitamin D because you'll be in the sunshine. Let's talk about the advantages of oxygenating the brain, of having endorphins flood through your brain, and most importantly, reducing the stress hormone of cortisol. So to me, it's an education process as well as giving her the means to actually make this thing happen. The boys, by the way, much prefer Zombie Run because, of course, boys like being chased by a bloody zombie. And this is an incredible program. I mean, you've got to just love technology if you know anything about boys. This is an ultra-immersive, all-encompassing running game and audio adventure. So there's such power in the narrative. So every time they put this on, every run becomes a secret mission where you're the hero, of course, and you've got people chasing you and trying to kill you the whole time, which is a very boy thing to do. Personally, I like my runs to be a little less stressful, but that's just me. So while you run to the perfect mix of heart-pumping audio drama and pulse-pounding songs from your own playlist, you'll collect supplies to go back to your base back home. So this is one, and I have got boys who swear by this, who say, if it wasn't for you, Michael, I wouldn't have this trim, taut, fantastic body. You've just made it so fantastic for me. Now, a couple of other things. Georgie's worried about a friend. Remember I said to you that the greatest predictor of well-being for all of your students was the ability to obtain, maintain and retain friendships. But what do you do when you're really worried about a friend? One of the many hats that I wear, and I'm very proud of this hat, is I am an agony uncle for Girlfriend magazine. Now I recognise that you probably don't get this journal in the mail. I think I'm the only 50-something bloke in Australia who legitimately receives Girlfriend magazine in the mail because I write the column. I'm entering my 12th year, and I'm actually saying to the editor this year that, you know what, I think it's time you hand it over to someone else. But can I tell you the most common problem over the last 12 years has been, I'm really worried about a friend. So now we've got an app called The Check-In, designed by Youth Beyond Blue, and I love this app because it actually is designed in consultation with young people to help them take the anxiety, the worry, the trepidation out of having a conversation with a friend that they're worried about. And I love it because it's very simple, it's 4 steps, super quick, which gets you to think about where are you going to have this conversation, what are you going to say, and how can you support your friend. There's also a fantastic section which actually helps you decide what to say if they said, no, I'm fine. So it really is a great little tool. This is something that I would wish you to promulgate to your fellow colleagues so that they can tell students about it as well. Mentioned earlier that Georgie had a bit of a problem with marijuana. Now this is the iPadpalooza, and I have to tell you that I use my iPad all the time in clinic, but this is the most useful. This is a web-based program called Well, first of all, look at all the terrible things that they're going to say about cannabis. The morons out there who want to decriminalise this stuff should really read the literature before they open their mouth. But this is the most brilliant program. It's called Clear Your Vision. It's free. It's designed by the National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre at the University of New South Wales. And guess what? It works. The evidence is in. So what I'll do is I'll take her through this on my iPad. She gets to choose a character, and usually they'll choose a character which is close to her age, so she'll choose Tara, and she'll go through this whole thing with me in my clinic. And one of the things it has in it is the SDS, which is the Substance Dependence Scale. What's so interesting is once they do this in my clinic, and the iPad says to them, on the basis of your responses, I'm telling you you're dependent on cannabis, they believe it. But if their parents tell them, or if anybody else tells them, they don't believe it. But if the iPad tells them, it's got credibility. So that's a great program, Clear Your Vision. Have a look at it, play with it. It works fantastically. Georgie, of course, has a relationship breakup, and I don't know if you remember when your first love broke your heart. I was living in Sydney. Her name was Clarissa Edwards. She said to me at the tennis camp, "You're dropped." That was nice. At least she didn't text it. She couldn't. There wasn't one. But I remember going down to the Edgecliff post office and crying my little 14-year-old heart out. And I had nobody to talk to about it because there was just no one in my life that I could talk to about such a terrible thing that happened. And it scarred me deeply. Now, of course, there's Breakup Shake-Up. And I love this app so much. I had such fun arguing with the people who are doing this. They're all kind of boffins and psychologists and researchers. They were from this great state of Queensland. And what was so interesting was that, have a look at the way it works. Essentially, it asks people, well, how do you want to feel following the breakup? And you can get to choose a category to get started. So you can go, oh, I want to just de-stress. I want to cheer up. Well, who wouldn't? Feel energized, take my mind off it. Feel comforted, feel motivated, figure it all out, feel confident. Now, let's hit de-stress, because I want to de-stress. So you get all of these different options. One of the options in the original thing was go to the pub and get pissed. And I said to them, this is for kids. I know you're from Queensland. But seriously, so we had a big stoush, but it's not in it, so I'll let you know who won. But look, just fantastic. Lots of different things to do. So you got to tell people about this app. It's cool. And of course, free, which is the most important thing. On a more serious note, many of my clients do actually get to the point where they self-harm. Georgie isn't, but her mate is. And she wants to do something about that. Now, some of these apps are really quite out there. I want to introduce you, not to that one, to this one, iCope. This was developed by a bunch of mental health nurses in the UK. And what was really interesting is they basically wanted to offer people like Georgie's mate an alternative to deliberate self-harm. They wanted to give them, in an app, simple steps to distract, displace, and of course to seek help, all at the touch of a button. So you go onto this app, and this is the first screen you see, and they've got the standard disclaimer. But it actually asks them first to rate the nature and extent of how they're feeling. So you can be having the fleeting thoughts, the strong feelings, or you can have already decided to self-harm. So what happens if you press fleeting? You get distractions, and they're broken up into social, physical, creative, fun, comforting, and constructive. My criticism of these lovely mental health nurses in the UK was, A, they didn't have speech to text, it's 2016. Second, no alternatives, no customization. You couldn't even customize the look and feel of the thing, which I think if you're talking about apps and young people, you need to be able to do. So that's fine. If you basically have strong feelings of harm, they actually give you action statements, like snapping an elastic band, using a red marker to draw on yourself, biting into a chili, no thank you, squeezing ice cubes, making ice cubes with red food colouring and rubbing where you want to self-harm, putting on a fake tattoo, and add a contact number. Again, no customisation. So I'd much prefer to sit with my client and come up with ideas that relate to them, rather than have a proscribed list. That's just me. If you have decided to self-harm, and this is where they took a great big leap, they gave the girls a virtual arm and choices on what you prefer to do. Would you prefer to cut or burn? Meet the arm. And in the olden first edition of this, when you swiped your hands across the screen, it bled. And that was fairly graphic. Now, you just get a bandage. So someone obviously gave them some feedback, so they changed it. Now, how did I come across this app? A kid brought it to me. And this is where it's all changed on its head. A lot of people say to me, oh, can't be recommending apps that don't have an evidence base. Well, guess what? The young people couldn't give a shit if it's got an evidence base because they're already using it, all right? So we actually have to recognise that you need to respond to where the young people are. Would I recommend this app to people? No. Why? Because I don't know that it works. And while I've got a couple of clients who say, yep, it does work for them, other people who've tried it give me more negative feedback. And this is why we need to have good science around this. The problem is the length of time that it takes for me to do a proper outcome study of this. There'll be another app. Or maybe there'll be another type of, mechanism which isn't an app anymore, because we won't have apps forever. So, interesting. Now, one of the really exciting things is that there exists already on Reach Out something called the Toolbox. Don't know if you've seen it, but if you type into Google Reach Out Toolbox, you'll find something really amazing. You'll find a mechanism for your students to go to this website, answer specific questions about their well-being, and the program will then suggest, on the basis of their answers, specific apps to help them manage their well-being. That is extremely cool. At the Young and Well CRC, we were on the cusp of creating an app that the young people could download, which would be customised to the name of your school. So if you worked here, it would be the St Hilda's Wellbeing app. And what that app did is it not only asked them questions about their well-being, but it tracked them. It tracked their mood, it tracked their exercise, their sleep, everything. And on the basis of that, it alerted them to not just the apps that were appropriate, the web-based programs, but it actually told them when it thought they needed to get some help as well as providing the school with real-time information, de-identified, about how much sleep the Year 7s were getting, the 8s, the 9s, the 10s, the 11s and the 12s. This app is called Synergy, not available yet, but with the iteration of the new CRC, which we hope kicks off in January, with a lovely budget of $35 million, we hope to perfect this. And we're looking for schools to volunteer to be living labs for us to try this out. But watch this space, it's going to be an app that comes to you soon. So, one of the things that this app would do is it would say to Georgie, look, you're not sleeping, your mood's terrible, you're not eating properly, you're not exercising, you need counselling. And what it would do would be recommend a smorgasbord of choices for her. Young people hate being told what to do. So it might be that they could log on to the local e-headspace. By the way, if your school doesn't have posters on the walls of your school advertising the presence of e-headspace, what are you doing? We have to make sure that young people know these things are out there. So you need to be advertising everywhere you possibly can, on websites, on walls, where the kids are looking, that these things exist. So e-headspace, the e-equivalent of Kids Helpline, not only do they have 1800 55 1800, which is the phone number, they also have online counselling. So in primary schools, we'd want you to be advertising that as well. And of course the phone number. But we'd also want her to visit a GP, if there's a good GP. We'd also want her to go to a local headspace. And of course you have one here, and we'd want to promulgate the whole idea, the normalisation of help-seeking behaviour through that app. And don't forget, of course, the brilliant school psychologists, or higher life forms, as I refer to them, are there as well. Last couple of slides. If Georgie does have suicidal thoughts, there's an app now to help psychologists develop a safety plan. It's called Beyond Now. It was developed by Beyond Blue, and I was on the committee that helped develop it. The really annoying thing about this app is it was designed for 18-year-olds and above. I almost got $500,000 from the Victorian government to do a youth one. They actually allocated the money, and then when the CRC closed, they quite rightly took it back again. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to get the money to develop the world's first ever proper youth suicide prevention app. That would be very cool. The safety plan basically means that I can sit in the room with Georgie and we can customise, write down what her warning signs are, brainstorm her reasons to live, brainstorm ways in making her environment safer, looking at things that she can do by herself, connecting with people and places that she finds comforting, and have a whole list of contacts, family and friends, and of course the professional support that she needs. That would be very cool. If she gets onto medication, to take it on a regular basis, and of course there's an app for that called Pillboxy, which reminds her to take her medication. So I've kind of bombarded you with just a few of the 1,000 apps that I'll use in clinical practice. The ones that I want you to focus on are the ones that related to mindfulness, sleep, diet, and exercise. These are the apps that are really going to make a difference, and perhaps we can begin to turn back the terrible statistics that I have shown you today, and perhaps when your children are your age, someone will be standing up here and saying, great news, 8 people didn't take their own life today, it was only 2. It was Tony Blair that said that young people were 17% of the population, just 17% of the population. But he followed up by making the observation that they were 100% of the future. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a future that very much lies in your hands. Thank you very much.